Hello YouTube, it's Sign here with Hobbies and Man once again, and today we're going to be doing a light novel review. Today we're going to be looking at Ideal Sponge Your Life, Volume 1. So this is written by Sunehiko Watanabe and illustrated by Juyu Ayakura, I think. And this published by J Novel Club. The demographic for the manga, at least, is seinen, and the genres here are isekai, slice of life, and romance. And it does have an adaptation, which is a manga. This one is available by 7 Seas, so if you guys want to check out the manga, definitely go for it. Generally, I prefer the light novels just because there's more bang for your buck storyline-wise, but it is what it is. You know, everyone kind of has their own preferences there. Overall, the rating for this was a 5 out of 5. I did really enjoy it. I do have some complaints and kind of some preferences that I think would have been really good for the story, but they don't really affect the story beyond just like making it more entertaining. So it is what it is. I give it a 5 out of 5 because I did generally enjoy what was presented to me. Significantly enjoyed it, actually. So that's just what I gave it. But it is pretty good. So I definitely think it definitely deserves that rating. It's just, it might sound like it doesn't based on some other things I say. So the premise here is that there's this guy called Senjiro who is just living a normal, you know, Japanese workman's kind of salaryman style life. And he somehow ends up summoned to this other world. And he is told that he has been summoned because he happens to have blood relations with this royal family that has been decimated, that only has one person left, who happens to be this really hot, beautiful woman, who happens to be the queen of this Spanish-esque kingdom. And she summoned him because she wants to marry him in order to have babies with him and ensure the future of her lineage. Mostly because her lineage has very special types of magic, and they have to preserve it for the good of the world, basically. But she gives him a choice. She says, do you want to or do you not? He decides that basically is a perfect deal. There's no loss. There's no reason why he should not take it, but he needs to prepare. So they give him 1 month to prepare, and he goes back to Japan, and he does all the things that he has to do before he goes back to this fantasy world. And it's pretty good. After that, you just follow the normal isekai stuff as he kind of figures out what to do with his life. So, yeah, the plot line is pretty good. We get the very simple isekai intro. This case, it's not a summoning to be a hero. It's just a summoning to be a husband, which is good. We get summoned by this woman called Aura. And then he is returned to Earth, and he's told, you have 1 month before we can do the thing, so use that month to prepare yourself. So he figures out all the things he has to do. He quits his job. He finishes up his 2 weeks of work after he decides to quit, and he figures out all the things he needs in order to have basically very modern style entertainment available for him in this very medieval fantasy world. And so he preps for the whole month. Eventually, he is returned to this other world, and he marries Aura, and they live, or he lives the sponger life by being the pampered husband of this queen. And it actually works out really well for him and Aura because in this society is mostly patriarchal, but the fact that she was queen and then she got married makes her lineage secured. She is now the queen of the place, and there is no way to dethrone her. However, there is the possibility of her husband choosing to take power from her because this patriarchal society is going to prefer him over her. I almost said whore. I'm sorry. I did not mean to say that, but over her. And so what happens is that she wants someone that doesn't really have aspirations for the throne, and Senjiro happens to be someone with that qualification. So it works out for her and him very well because Aura happens to be exactly Senjiro's type, a very tall, buxom, curvy woman with darker skin and bright red hair. So it's really, really good. It works out for both of them, and we just get to see their life together for a few moments before the inevitable politics of living in a society happens, and he has to deal with doing some of that, right? So overall, very good stuff. I really enjoyed the plotline. I thought it was really satisfying. The one thing I didn't like, and this is a very weird nitpick, is that even though this story was set up as like a very, you know, raunchy harem type of story, it doesn't actually get raunchy ever. And even though that's not really a complaint I would normally have, I think that the story is too well set up for that to not be the case. Like, if this was written by an American author, there would be, you know, a lot of raunchy, smutty scenes all over the book. But because it's written in Japan, it doesn't really have the ability to do so without being hentai. And I really wish that it was a hentai novel, because it would have worked really well. The setup is there. All of the characters are there. Everything is set up really well, because the romance is actually really well done in this story. I mean, you know, as well done as like it can be in this type of story. It is done really well, and so the moment where they consummate their marriage actually works really nicely, but it like fades to black before they even start. And I feel like just a little bit of smuttiness would have gone a long way in making this story even more entertaining than it is. So, you know, I never thought I would complain about lack of smut or lack of ecchi content, but here I am. So, yeah, that is the only complaint I have about the story. But given that it's not really that big of a deal, that's why I still gave it a 5 out of 5 on my rating. So, yeah, that's the only complaint I have about the plot line. So let's move on to the rest of the story. The characters here are pretty good. We just have Senjuro, Aura. We have this woman called Gabriella, who happens to be the wife of this other character. She's brought in to teach Senjuro ethics, right? Which is interesting. And then there's a bunch of other side characters, but they don't really end up mattering all that much. Senjuro and Aura are basically the only characters that really do anything in the story. And then we have you know, some other things happen, but in general, it's just those two characters. And then in terms of world building, we have a medieval setting. It's basically an RPG world, an RPG, you know, medieval European style world. However, the really interesting part here, and the part that I really enjoyed a lot actually, is that this version of the medieval European setting is not based on German European, you know, German medieval settings or English medieval settings. It's based on Spain. It has people that are brown and that are vaguely like not Spanish as in most people think of them, but rather kind of vaguely Middle Eastern in some ways. And the characters specifically are actually noted to be somewhere between Latino and Southeastern Asian. So they're basically like Indian and Latino and somewhere in between, which would be like Middle Easterns. And I think that that's really, really great. I really like that they mention Latinos and not necessarily Spaniards, because the skin tone is a lot darker than most Spaniards would kind of have, at least from what I understood. And also they speak Spanish in this country, and the Spanish they speak is not actually Spanish from Spain. It's not Castellano. It seems to be American neutral Spanish, because, okay, so I have to explain what Spanish kind of works like. So everyone that speaks Spanish is mutually intelligible. Everyone is going to understand each other. However, there's very major differences between the different dialects of Spanish, right? So Spanish from Spain has a lot of extra conjugations and a lot of extra, more like serious kind of ways of denoting respect to other people. Like they have these verb endings like yes or ies, eis, and stuff like that. And they also have the vos, what's it called? Article, I guess, like the pronoun vos instead of just tú, which is interesting. But it is significantly different from Latin America. Most people in Latin America don't really subscribe to most of these other like respectable ideas. Like they don't really have those extra verb endings, and most people in Latin America don't use vos. However, in Latin America, there are 2 or 3 different major Spanish groups. There is the Mexican Spanish group, which is more or less the most largely spoken Spanish because Mexico's population is 3 times as large as basically any other country that speaks Spanish. And so in order to have the same amount of Spanish speakers as Mexico has, you have to have the next 3 largest Spanish-speaking countries together, which would be Spain, Argentina, and Colombia. So Mexican Spanish is pretty large and pretty significant because there's a lot of people that speak Spanish in Mexico. Then we have Rio Platense Spanish, which is the southern tip of South America, which would be Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina. They speak a specific type of Spanish that is a lot more Italian-esque. They have a lot more kind of harsh Y and J sounds in Spanish down there. They also use vos, even though they don't use it the same way that Spaniards do. And then we have Colombian Spanish, which is also pretty large. And those are the four kind of major Spanish from Spanish-speaking countries. However, because the U.S. also has a large Spanish-speaking population, there is a neutral Spanish that is made to be as neutral as possible so that every country can understand it and not feel like they're being, spoken to by someone from a different country. However, it is very easy to tell that this version of Spanish is not the version that you speak, because it uses words that don't really sound like normal Spanish, because they're basically English words that are changed in order to sound in Spanish, right? So they use this type of Spanish in the novel, and I'm guessing that this is because they didn't want to ascribe to any one specific country, even though Spain would probably be the correct one, because it's just window dressing for the story. It doesn't actually matter that you speak Spanish, and that there's some moments where they use Spanish in the text, right? So I'm guessing that they just consulted someone that spoke Spanish in some capacity, and they just had them write that type of Spanish. I'm pretty sure Japan probably doesn't give a shit about what Spanish was used. They just needed something that wasn't Japanese or English or, German or French, right? So I thought that was interesting. I liked that they had Spanish in the story. I thought it was really, really cool. And then there's two major types of magic. There's elemental magic, which is really standard, RPG type magic. And then there's special magic, which is bloodline magic, which is only passed down through very specific bloodlines, and is the reason why Aura wanted to marry Sanjiro. So, there's also a reason why Sanjiro happens to have a lot of blood similarities, or is genetically connected to Aura, which is explained in the story, but I don't really want to talk about it because I think it's really interesting and I don't really want to spoil it. So there we go. In terms of the artwork, it's good. It's not perfect, but it has a lot of good vibes to it, and the way that Aura is drawn matches pretty well with the description, so I quite like it overall. In terms of fan service, there's very little for what it would essentially be the most easily fan serviceable story that also makes sense, because a lot of times in Japanese media, the ecchi fan servicey bits don't really make sense in the story, but this story is set up to be specifically sensical when there's fan servicey bits, when there's smut, and when there's horny kind of aspects to the story. And I feel like for something that is so well set up, it does not take advantage of it at all. So this is the first time I'm going to say it, but I wish there was more fan service in the story. So there we go. In terms of a rating, it's a 5 out of 5. I thought it was really, really fun. I really enjoyed it. I was a lot more I was surprised by how much more I enjoyed this than I originally thought I would. So it was a great purchase. And yeah, overall, that's my thoughts on Ideal Sponge Your Life. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.